For those of you who are unaware, I was recently on Adam Krigler's show. I had an absolutely wonderful time, and I premiered my glasses because I went and got glasses, and I'm wearing them right now. For some reason, I forgot to wear them during the course of the video, probably because they're new, so I'm not wearing them in any other parts of this video. I don't know why, but maybe I'll change later. Let me know you think more glasses in the comments below. So one of the things I find quite concerning and really annoying, if you're a long-term viewer of the channel, you will know this, is fan bases and the American people's obsession with nostalgia. The idea that we can never let any franchise, any intellectual property go, and we must demand from studios long-awaited sequels and soft reboots to continue the story on because you are not capable of imagining what happens or accepting the conclusion that you already received. And the thing that really bothers me about this is that 95% of the time, in the best case scenarios, all you get is a garbage, rehashed, older version of your characters wandering around in situations that they should have long moved past based on their character arcs, and the camera, the director, everything in the scene just being constructed so that you and the audience can go, I remember that. I know what that is. Wow, I can't believe I remember that. And it gets really ridiculous time and time again when you see these patterns emerge, because this has also led people to kind of buy into terrible sequels and terrible additions in franchises that should have never existed previously, because they find it so off-putting, so empty, so hollow what they're seeing now, that they retroactively start praising trash in the past just based on this nostalgia. So essentially, instead of rejecting nostalgia, instead of growing up, instead of acknowledging that certain franchises should have ended where they normally intentionally were deliberately designed to end, people end up praising older trash as a way to get back against this newer trash, even though this is all pushed by the same company. Perfect example of this is something that's out right now, even though I have not seen it yet, is the response to the Matrix movie, the new one that came out with old man Keanu Reeves, a story that did not need to go past one movie. A lot of people don't like it, and now all of a sudden they're talking about how the two Matrix sequels are suddenly retroactively good when that's objectively nonsensical. Stop it, cut it out. Those movies were boring as hell. They were absolutely ridiculous. If you want to talk about rehashing and being nonsensical and undercutting the original premise, there's nothing more hollow or empty or lacking in creativity than having a great villain, Agent Smith, in the first movie and literally just copying that villain over and over again for the two sequels. And of course, there's the iconic example of this, the people who praised the Star Wars prequels in order to get back at the Star Wars sequels, even though the hype around the Star Wars prequels really started when Disney purchased it, because this was an elaborate marketing campaign that you idiots all fell for. I know that a lot of you out in my audience saw the Star Wars prequels when you're about this age, so that's the level of maturity you've taken into those movies, but let me remind you that those movies were super cynical cash grabs on behalf of George Lucas. They over-explained the backstory of Darth Vader, which was totally unnecessary and undercut the character. And on top of that, 80% of the movies are shot, reverse shot characters sitting down and talking, only to be interrupted by those characters standing up and talking, shot, reverse shot once again. So stop, they're not good, they're never going to be good. Get out of my comment section, all you people who are in denial about this. Star Wars is 3 good movies, and that is it. Let it go, move beyond it, mature with the rest of the world, because you are part of the problem. Now, with that being said, that's the best case scenario. That's the optimal option that you're going to get when you're doing this. But we're actually going to talk about something worse. Something so bad, it might even be a bit damaging to your health. Oh my god, I have a health with justice transition coming right now. Catch you on the other side. Our appearance plays a huge role in how we're perceived and our personal satisfaction, but unfortunately, there's a lot of shady companies that take advantage of this fact in order to sell you products that don't really work because they don't attack the problems with aging at the root. That's why I actually am sponsored today by Health Health with Justice. If you want to get something that will make your skin as soft and itty baby as my skin right here, then go to healthwithjustice.com, and for the next 24 hours, you can get 51% off your order. There's a 60-day money-back guarantee, so if you're not satisfied, you can return it. These products work. I scoop it up and put in my drink in the morning, and it's absolutely amazing. Go to healthwithjustice.com. So best case scenario, as we discussed, is you get something like Jurassic World, where it's a soulless cash grab reboot with nothing new added. That's basically the camera directing you at remember this, remember that, like Ghostbusters Afterlife or whatever. Worst case scenario is that the IP is actually given to somebody who has disdain for either the era that the IP was invented in or when it came into prominence, or the IP itself. And that's what you get when you have something like Ghostbusters 2016. Something that completely wants to ape off the nostalgia and the member berries from Ghostbusters, but is totally alien to everything about the original Ghostbusters. And that's what the Sex and the City reboot is. The Sex and the City reboot, and by the way, I'm not the target audience for Sex and the City. I know that full well. I am not a 52-year-old woman who has an estranged relationship with all of her children, who consumes 2 bottles of red wine a day just to get over the depressing reality, who needs escapism with these successful women who don't appear to have any children. And I know some of them get children later, some of them get married later. Calm down. I did my research. That's not me. So I understand that this isn't aimed at me. But this new show, this new sequel, isn't even aimed at those women who have those depressing problems and need this level of escapism. This new show is aimed at the people who write critical essays about the 4 main characters in the original Sex and the City being too white because white people ruin everything and everything's racist. This new version of Sex and the City isn't about high-powered independent women leading the 90s feminist dream. This is all about tearing down these characters in order to fight racism. Imagine that. A comedic sitcom-like series from the 90s 2000s era that is now rebooted to fight racism in a woke manner as its chief primary main objective goal, and undercutting the people who actually made the series work. And a perfect example of this, and no, I don't know the character's name, and no, I don't care, is Cynthia Nixon's character.
Hey, that's where the professor sits. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Thank you.
Now, I'm told in the original series that Cynthia Nixon's character was a corporate attorney. Now, you can have whatever feels you want about this show highlighting somebody who has to grind through the corporate world, blah, blah, blah. Don't really care about that. But point being, this was somebody who fit like that 90s version of feminism. Somebody who was a career woman first, and everything else kind of fell to the wayside. And I know they had personal relationships, whatever. That's not really the point of what we're talking about. But my point being is that this was somebody who was successful in their career field, in the business world, that was fighting against the 90s patriarchy of it being a men's world in corporate law. Now, all of a sudden, in the future, in this new series, in this reboot, Cynthia Nixon's character is going to school to learn about fighting for human rights, because in current woke world, being a successful corporate attorney is nothing to aspire to. Women who want to be successful in your career, that's no bueno, because capitalism, and you're just fulfilling the roles of capitalism or whatever. So now this fully successful woman, this adult person who has climbed the corporate ladder, who has overcome adversity for years on the series and in the 2 movies. I didn't watch any of this, so just calm down. I'm giving you a little generalized narrative here. Is taking classes on how to be a human rights activist, and this is what this character has been reduced to. Now, I just want to point out that I can pause this video at literally every 5-second mark if I were so inclined. Now, I will be doing something similar to that, but I'm gonna try to let the clips breathe a little bit before I interject with my amazing, stellar, and beautiful points. So, the setup of this is that Cynthia Nixon sits in the professor's seat, and she's told by another student, and then she moves over to another seat Totally normal scenario. It's happened before, especially in these like weird classes where you're all sitting around chairs in a circle because everybody's equal in this classroom and no professor stands above them because hierarchy is capitalism and Marx's nonsense.
Sorry, he just told me.
Someone's quick with the pronouns.
It's fine. I am the professor.
So again, I just want you to think about somebody who actually does love the show, somebody who watched this, who was engaged with these characters, who appreciated the narrative as it was originally constructed, and think about how you would react if Cynthia Nixon, for whatever reason, were your favorite character or one of your beloved characters, and one of the earliest scenes in the show that's making the rounds is of her being humiliated because she's white. And by the way, I need to pause for a second and point out that Cynthia Nixon has tried repeatedly running for governor in New York as my state's governor, and never, ever in the hell ever should Cynthia Nixon ever hold elective office, much less anything at an executive position. Cynthia Nixon read this script. She decided that she was going to humiliate herself on behalf of all white women because, make no mistake, that's what the scene is supposed to represent, just so she can get some woke virtue points, and that's the level of character that we need nowhere near any form of representative government. She has no pride, she has no honor at all whatsoever, and this is fully displayed with the scene. So yes, I'm taking this super seriously, and I'm making it political. Come at me in the comments if you want to fight about it. Let's roll into the clip.
You're the professor?
Yeah.
You're Nia Wallace?
Yes. Why do you seem so surprised?
So I just want to point out how terrible the writing is in this scenario, how overly dramatic these microaggressions actually are. First of all, you're making plot points about microaggressions, and honestly, it's not even played for a comedic purpose. The only thing this scene serves is the people out there, the 5 of them in the world, who love this woke trash on the screen, and most of those people are in this modern writer's room. They wrote this scene, and the whole point of it is for us to look at Cynthia Nixon and say stupid whites, but in reality, instead of saying stupid whites, we look at the writers of this and think stupid writers.
Why do you seem so surprised?
Well, your braids.
A law professor can't have hair like mine? Why is that?
Oh, no. I didn't mean because of the braids. I was just thrown because the braids are so different than the hair in your photo on the Columbia website. My comment had nothing whatsoever to do with it being a black hairstyle. I knew that you were black when I signed up for this class.
Again, it's like there's not even a script to the scene. It's just a woke talking points checkoff. You have the microaggression against this strong, independent, successful black woman by this evil, elderly white woman not thinking that she was the professor, even though the scene sets up a reasonable reason why she wouldn't think that, because she just sat in that seat. And thinking about the next person, because she doesn't know who the professor is, sitting in that seat, she decided to give the same warning, the same heads up, out of gratefulness to the previous person. Then you have the whole gender pronouns microaggression. How dare this woman refer to this whatever person as a he or she? I don't even remember. I wasn't paying attention, honestly. I know I'm making a video about this, but honestly, I'm trying to pay attention as little as possible so I don't internalize the brain rot. Then we have comments about black hair. You know, that issue, the issue of black hair, and how white people supposedly somewhere out there in the ether are anti-black hair this day and age, especially those old stupid white women that ruin everything. Stupid whites. What are we even talking about? Stupid whites. And now we're moving even further to the other inverse kind of curveball thing where she's like, no, I know that I'm a stupid white racist. I'm just here so I can learn from you because you're black. And then that creates a whole situation as well.
That was important to me.
You signed up for this class because I'm black?
Well, not just because you're black. I picked this class because you're such a force in academia, on top of everything you do as a community activist. God, I sound like such a brown nose. I mean,
Is brown nose a microaggression? I didn't know that. They all paused and looked. And that's another thing that you notice is every time that she makes a microaggression, which by the way is nonsensical, not to be concerned about, they cut 2 people in the classroom for like cringe reactions to her as if they're trying to communicate that something more epic is actually going on in this scene than is actually happening. It's just a boring talking scene that is horribly underwritten by people who are more concerned with activism than writing. But it's nice to know that Cynthia Nixon is worshiping worshiping this black woman activist. She's looking up to her. She wants to be just like her when she grows up because Cynthia Nixon is learning about her white privilege or whatever.
Please just forget that I ever said anything about your hair. Hair has nothing whatsoever to do with appropriateness or intelligence or gravitas, obviously. I mean, do I look like someone who attaches any significance to hair? I let mine go gray, and I don't care if it makes me look old. Not that I'm ageist. Do I sound ageist?
You really want me to answer that question?
They have a whole series. They have other characters. They can interject their woke nonsense in there, but you could tell that these people want to fix Sex in the City. It's always great when people reboot an IP and they're fundamentally intent on quote-unquote fixing it and correcting the white privilege of these 4 white lead women who were successful in their show and people actually liked it around the country, that they have to cram all this into one scene. So she's now talking about how she's ageist and oh my god, and then the black woman professor looks her up and she's like, do you really want me to answer that, you stupid white? And then she says, I'm just gonna shut up.
I am so sorry for taking everyone's time. This is not at all who I am. I will just be quiet now.
Okay, Hi.
Because I need to shut up because I'm a stupid white. Now, by the way, Cynthia Nixon, I actually do feel like she needs to chill out a little bit and not run for governor of my state. Maybe run for governor of another state, maybe in the old Soviet Union. But narratively speaking, this is just an insult to people who want the original show, wanted a reboot, and of course, an attack on white people, specifically white women. But wait, there is more between these two characters, because there's also another scenario, highlighted by Myth Informed, by the way, which is where I'm getting the bulk of these clips. Give them credit, follow them on Twitter, blah, 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 you guys get the drill, where they have yet another interaction where this woman wants to save her.
I just need to find my ID. It's in here somewhere. It'll just be a second. Sorry.
Please step to the side until you do.
No, it's right here. I'm just... hello.
So the next scenario that is laid out to us, and you can see this right here, is Professor Nia Wallace, the stunning and brave professor who Cynthia Nixon microaggressed against before, is online at security, but her ID is in her badge, and due to protocols, she needs to show her badge to the security guard. Now, Cynthia Nixon, because I don't know if you know this, asking black people for ID is actually racist, decides that she needs to step in this scenario and stick up for her because black people need white people's white privilege to stick up for them, as we've heard multiple different times by multiple leftists. But since you guys know that they have contradicting ridiculous ideologies wherein silence is violence, but also white people speaking up equals white savior, needless to say, this obviously doesn't go well for poor old Cynthia Nixon.
This is Professor Nia Wallace. She teaches law here. You can let her through.
Not without an ID, I can't.
I can vouch for her. Here, I'm Miranda Hobbs. I'm in her class.
Yeah, well, you ain't her.
Miranda, it's okay. It's in here somewhere. Just one more place. If not, I'll step out.
So, of course, Cynthia's butting in. She's trying to insert her white privilege to save this black woman because this security guard, according to Cynthia Nixon, is doing a racism right now, even though he's literally checking everybody's ID to make sure that they can come into the place. But Cynthia Nixon is having none of that. Cynthia Nixon is somebody who's trying to humble herself to this god professor that is so above her, even though she's so humble that she sits in a chair in a circle in the classroom to show that she's not actually above her, even though clearly they're trying to say that this woman is in fact above her.
Sorry. I don't understand why you're questioning her identity.
I'm not questioning her identity. I'm waiting for her to show me her ID.
Well, it's interesting, because you barely glanced at mine when I went through. Can I have your name?
No.
Here it is.
Thank you. Come on through, Professor Wallace.
Again, if you weren't clear that Cynthia Nixon was spotting a racism and trying to fight that racism that she spotted, she then mentions how you barely looked at my ID and you just let me in. This is because I am a white privileged woman who is duty bound and obligated to acknowledge my white privilege because that is my duty to acknowledge that. Meanwhile, security guards like this will let you flash an ID really quickly once they see that it is an ID to the building. They're not actually checking your specific name and qualifications. qualifications. In fact, if you're confident and you have something that looks like this ID, you can walk through and sneak into after parties or whatever, as long as you move with purpose and confidence and act like you belong. However, you have to at least display something. This is why, by the way, he barely glanced at her ID and just welcomed her in, because this is about protocol. It's not about doing a racism against this poor independent black woman who needs to be saved by Cynthia Nixon, who actually might not need to be saved by Cynthia Nixon, because look at the following scene.
Hi. I just had to say something. Did you? Excuse me? Did you have to say something? Oh. One of the important takeaways I got from how to be an anti-racist is if you see something, you have to speak on it. You have to call it out. Well, that's very noble of you, even if a tad bit white savior complex. But the reality is you just inflamed a situation that was perfectly fine. He needed to see my ID. It was somewhere in my bag.
Look, I will say, even though this is one of the worst written shows based on the scenes that I've seen that has come out in a long time, they really are capturing in a meta way what the writers are trying to portray in this scene. Because Cynthia Nixon is stepping up. She's quoted how to be an anti-racist to, kind of excite and cheer up this black woman to try to impress her, worship at her altar. And in reality, that's what the writers are doing. But there's probably like 4 black people in the entire country that are watching this, and most of them are only watching the scenes where they were an extra in to be like, hey, I was on that show, because even they know that this show is trash. They just want it on their resume very briefly so that they could say, before this show is canceled, I was on a TV show on HBO Max. But yeah, this is ridiculous in every way. Obviously, more humiliation. Obviously, yet another scene where Cynthia Nixon, who again was a corporate attorney, is portrayed as a stupid white, and the whole scene is about her being a stupid white. But it goes on, and we're going to roll into one final clip with Cynthia Nixon before we roll into another situation, and then we're going to wrap the whole thing up and bring it home. So the final scene in this character arc for Cynthia Nixon, aka the stupid white, involves a scenario that actually is kind of funny, so I want to give credit where credit is due. For some reason, a person who is dressed as Chucky from the Child's Play franchise decides to rob Nia Wallace in the train station, which is crowded even though she's a woman, and people don't typically let short, easily defeatable people rob women in train stations like this. And Cynthia Nixon is there, and Cynthia Nixon is like, oh my god, and she hesitates for a moment, and then she comes over and hits little Chucky on the head with a book and gets her bag back. Now, there's a bunch of people, including a guy that's just watching and laughing, and to me, that's the actual villain of the scene, because dude, you're much bigger than little Chucky, you should help the woman who's about to get robbed, but he's too busy talking about it over on his phone, which makes him a scumbag and says a lot more about people who observe crimes happen that could easily intervene when the situation is not that dangerous, but choose not to do so. But then Cynthia Nixon looks at the professor, who's been giving her crap this whole time, and says, I'm not sure if that was a white savior moment or not.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I was unclear to me whether that was a white savior moment or not.
I think that was any kind of savior will do moment.
Now, the reason this made me laugh, other than the absurd scenario of somebody, for no reason, after scaring a gay guy, deciding to do a snatch and grab robbery of a purse of a woman in a Chucky costume, being thwarted by an 86-year-old woman, is because it's actually got a little bit of truth in it, unlike the other things. Because white people like Cynthia Nixon, progressives, are so weak and cowardly that they actually advocate and support groups like Black Lives Matter, the movements like defund the police or abolish the police if they're even stupider, that ultimately lead to more victimization of black people because they're afraid if they call out crime in the black community, of which the majority of victims of those crimes are black, they will be seen as racist. So in reality, it might actually be racism for this white person to prevent a crime from being committed against this black woman, because criminal justice system punishing criminals, that's just wrong. But overall, still ridiculous, and it just goes to show you that this is like your protagonist, this is your main character that you follow for years, one of your main characters that you follow for years, and she is reduced to the point where even when she does something objectively good, prevents a theft of a woman right in front of her face, she has to question that because she is totally subordinate to this professor, this once high-powered, career-minded woman who was independent and didn't need nobody to tell her how to run her life, has to beg for approval from this much younger woman who works as a professor and didn't make nearly as much money or as much success as her in the business world. It's shameful, it's disgusting, and again, this was all sold to fans of the original series as a nostalgia buff, and even the woke critics hate it. Now, with that being said, we're closing the book on Cynthia Nixon's character for this episode of my YouTube channel. And maybe you're an original fan of the original series, and you think to yourself, no, I think it's a natural progression for this character from the original series to just be the punching bag that everybody points and says stupid whites at from a narrative standpoint. I leave that up to you. Again, not the target audience for this show. But there's one more clip, and it's one of the characters, I forget which one, basically works on a podcast because it's current year. And I got news for you. Anybody who has any podcasting equipment like a Shure SM7B microphone is a scumbag. And they're talking about how this is like a non-binary podcast. I'm just going to roll the clip so you can understand what we're doing.
Me, the podcast that talks about gender roles, sexual roles, and cinnamon rolls. All the roles I care passionately about. Representing the cisgender women is Carrie Bradshaw.
Hey, hey.
And representing the cishet men is the dude himself, Jackie Nee.
What up, sister, brother?
That's right, because I'm both and neither. I am Che Diaz, your host and queer, non-binary, Mexican-Irish diva, representing everyone else outside these two boring genders.
Look, I genuinely apologize for subjecting you to that. I know that was bad. I know that was cringe, but I have to inform you, I have to make it a little sadder for a second, that there's probably 1,000 podcasts that open in a very similar way on the internet.com right now. But yet again, you see this pattern, this debasement of the original characters. And even for me, somebody who's not invested in those original characters, I could acknowledge that this show was on for years, that these people evolved on the show, like their characters evolved on the show. And that has allowed people to feel so attached to them. That's one of the reasons why the movies are so successful. That's one of the reasons why this reboot even exists. And yet all of the characters, and I've read this in a review, so it's not just these two, seem to have a person of color or a non-binary transes or a non-binary person of color transes that basically stands next to them in almost every scene and lectures them about their white privilege and basically is an apology for the original show being successful with 4 white leads. That's really what this reboot is about. And if you're going to do a nostalgia cash grab, if you're going to try to use this to say, hey, Sex and the City fans, sign up for HBO Max, then why bother if you're just going to hire people who hate the show and try to appeal to people who hate the show on a fundamental level due to the races of the protagonists? It's absolutely ridiculous in every possible way. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, you could show it by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. You can support me on my social medias, which are linked in the description. Everybody have an absolutely wonderful Merry Christmas. I will be making more videos before the end of the year. Till next time.